Hello, Management 6133 students. Welcome to week 8 of our course. In this week, we will be discussing the production process. If you can remember previously, we talked about 3 main processes most businesses do, and that's buying, making, and selling. And if you can remember in the procurement process chapter or week, we discussed buying. And then in the sales and distribution or fulfillment chapter, we talked about selling. This week, we talk about making or the production process. So this is what we're going to be discussing in this lecture. And as we're talking about production or manufacturing, it's important to understand that the production process consists of various steps and activities involved with making finished goods or semi-finished goods. And the common production processes are discrete, repetitive, and process manufacturing. Discrete and repetitive manufacturing involves the production of tangible things such as computers, bikes, cars, individual things. And the difference between discrete and repetitive is making the same thing over and over a period of time. Whereas discrete is making similar things in batches. So if you think of Global Bikes, they maybe will make the touring bikes in one batch, and then they'll switch off to the off-road bikes. So they make individual units, but in different batches for different things over time. Process manufacturing refers to making things such as paint, soft drinks, chemicals. So they're things that aren't made in individual units, but they're made in bulk and measured in quantities such as gallons and liters. So there are 2 main production strategies. The first one is the make to stock. This is where you make things, it's triggered by a need to increase inventory. So this is usually a result of forecasting and deciding what you think you will sell. And inventory is typically stored in a warehouse until it's used to fulfill customer orders. And when it falls below a certain level, then it triggers the make to stock process. So Apple, they do that for their computers. They anticipate how many computers they will sell, and they make to that forecast. Where the other strategy is make to order, and this is a process that's triggered by an actual order. So Dell computers, for their one product line, they wait for an order before they start making it. So Global Bikes, they use a make to stock production strategy. So they do a forecast and figure out how many bikes they think they will sell over the year, and they'll make to that stock. So here's a picture of the entire production process from start to finish, from being triggered to finishing making something. So the production process starts for a request for production. The request for production is typically triggered by another process, such as fulfillment. So if we get an order, so the make to order strategy, so if we get an order, it triggers us to make something, or material planning. So that determines that through our forecasting, we figure out we need to make so many bikes, and the company needs to increase the inventory to fulfill that forecast. So there's lots of data we need in this step. We obviously need a material master for all for the part that is to be made and the parts that are needed to make that finished good. We need a bill of material. So bills of material think of a recipe. It's a list of ingredients. So all the ingredients we need to make that finished good. We need routings. So if you think of a bill of material, the list of ingredients, the routings are the instructions or the operations needed to produce the finished good. Obviously, we need organizational data such as the client, company code, the plant where the finished good is going to be made, and storage locations of where the raw material is coming from and where the finished goods will be stored. So the overall goal of this step is to create a planned order. So this is a formal request for production that indicates what materials are needed and how many units and when. So as I said, One of the master data needed is the bill of material. And again, this is a list of all the parts we need to make the finished goods. And it's, both raw material and semi-finished goods. And it can be either a single level or multi-level. So this is the first level of our bill of material for the touring bikes. But as you can see, the wheel assembly actually has down parts needed to make the wheel assembly. So it's usually defined at the plant level, and the data item for each bill of material, we usually need the material number, description, quantity, and item category. We need the item category to tell us the type of material and how the material is to be used in the bill of material. So those sorts of things. As we said, we also need the routing. So this is the instructions of how to build the bikes. So it's a list of operations. It tells us the sequence. So this is the order things are to be done in. It tells us the work center, so where the work is to be carried out, and the time needed for each step. As you can see here is what needs to be done in this step and all the materials needed for that step. So after there's been a request for production, the next step is to authorize the production. So obviously the trigger is the planned order, and we can use the planned order to reference for our production order. So obviously we get a lot of the information from the planned order, such as the material master, bill of material, the routings, the work centers, the PRTs. So the overall goal or the task in this step is to create a production order. So that's an actual commitment to produce a specific quantity of materials by a certain date. And in this step, we actually select the master data, such as the bill of material, routings, PRTs, those sorts of things. And obviously the outcome of this step is the creation of the production order. And when you create that production order, scheduling will happen, and scheduling are dates when various operations are to be performed, and the capacities in the work centers. We'll do availability checks to see what parts, raw materials are available. We'll make reservations for reserve time on machines and some preliminary costing. And obviously, if there's some material we need to make our finished good that we don't have, we'll have to issue some purchase requisitions. So one of the other things I've mentioned that is needed are production resource tools. So these are tools that are required to make the product. So we were talking about how the bill of material is the list of ingredients needed to make something. The routings are the instructions. So these are the tools, the equipment needed to make this finished good. So it could also be instructions, calibration tools, anything that's not fixed in a fixed location. Okay, so after production is authorized, the next step is to release this production order. And this has to be done before any of the subsequent steps can be carried out. So in this step, it enables the subsequent steps, so it issues all the goods to production. And it will print shop papers, so all the things that need to happen in the work systems or the work centers. In addition, as you can see, the PDC, so an SAP can communicate directly with external shop floor control systems that automate the exchange of data from SAP into other systems. So that can happen here as well. So we've issued the production order to the shop floor. Now what we need to do is to issue all the raw materials to production so that we can make our finished goods. So obviously this is where material or components are issued to the production order from storage. Obviously we need our production order, information about the materials issued, organizational data regarding the locations involved, and user input. So in this step, we're issuing materials from storage to the production order, and the material master is updated to reflect reduction in quantity on hand and the inventory value. General ledger accounts are updated. Material reservations are reduced by the materials issues, and actual costs are updated. So again, the big part of this step is we're getting all the material needed to make the finished goods out of storage and onto the production floor. So obviously the next step is, once we have all the material we need to make the finished goods is to actually make it. And then when the finished goods have been produced, the person completing the work has to confirm that the work is complete. So a confirmation indicates how much work was completed, where it was completed, so in what work center, and who did the work. And the outcomes of this step is that the data associated with the work actually completed are recorded. We have some financial outcomes, so labor costs are debited to production order, and the cost center where work was completed is credited. So after production has been completed and confirmed, the materials produced are placed into finished goods inventory. And this step is done via a goods receipt against the purchase order. So if you can remember in the procurement process, we talked about when we received goods from the supplier, we did a goods receipt. So the same thing is done here. Once the finished goods are made, we do a goods receipt into storage. So the goods are physically received, the materials from the shop floor, and we place them into the appropriate storage location. And the quantities on hand and the value of the inventory are updated in the material master. General ledger accounts are updated to reflect the consequences of the good receipt. So accounting and financial accounting and management documents are created, and the status of the production order is updated. So it's done. We've made the finished goods. So in SAP, we'll show this production order is technically complete, so TECO. So this is, indicating that the production order is set to TECO status and that no further execution of the production process steps is possible. We also have to look at it from an accounting process. So we set the production order to closed, CLSD. So after a production order has been completed and settled status is set to CLSD, in the accounting perspective. So we've requested the production, we've authorized production, we've released the production order to the plant floor, we've got all the raw material out of storage, we've made it, we've confirmed that we've made it, we've received the finished goods into storage, and we've set all statuses to complete. There are some things that we have to do periodically throughout the production process, and we'll take a look at that. So in some periodic processing that we have to do is, one of the things is overhead calculations. So there's costs that are not associated directly with production, and things like rent, insurance, those sorts of things. So periodically we have to accumulate these costs into cost centers. We also have work in process. So finished goods not completed and placed in inventory until a later point in time. So if we have a project that, items that would take a really long time to make, periodically you have to calculate the work in process and make postings in the general ledger. The other thing is settlement. So this is where we have a difference between debits and credits, and this variance has to be settled. So these are things we do periodically in production. So as with the other processes, there's reporting we can do in the production process. So we can have a variety of lists, reports, and analytics from the production information system. So here's an example of a report we can run. So this is the status of component or material utilization for several orders. So you can see things that are released, the date, quantity, those sorts of things. Here's another report we can run. So this is the same orders. And as we can see, this production order had an actual start date and an actual finish date. This production order hasn't started yet, it's only been released. There's also this report, so the stock requirements list, so we can see what materials are on hand or a planned order, those sorts of things. We've already talked about the different organizational data required and the master data required. Material master is very important in the production process. So hopefully that helps you understand the production process.